Hi there, I'm Madonna Guy from Leaf Natural Therapies. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about one of our clients who I saw recently for a major chronic fatigue. Now this guy is in his 50s and he's someone who has worked really hard on his health for about 10 years. And sometimes he feels like he's getting glimpses of his old self back, but generally he just wonders, is this ever going to improve? Am I going to wake up every single day of my life feeling exhausted and fatigued with just that occasional spark of energy? So what we ended up doing was, because I've done a few kinesiology sessions on him and his body has been running on survival patterns. Now this is a guy, just to give you an idea, this is a guy who does not feel stressed. In fact, he's also the sort of guy who would say stress really doesn't impact on his life at all. Now with survival patterns, sometimes what it can do is be so deep-seated that your nervous system has actually got to the spot that it simply has no more oomph. So it's not like the fight and flight where you might get the fluttery heart and the exhaustion and the anxiety and the panic attacks. It's actually so deep, this exhaustion, that the body doesn't actually have the oomph. If that tiger came in through the room, they would get you. So that's sort of how exhausted he's been feeling. So we ended up doing 3 things on him yesterday. I checked his survival patterns, and because we've done several of those balances, that was actually fine. The second thing we did was have a look at his blood, and we did find a subclinical iron deficiency that was across the board. We also found that his white blood cells were all over the place and he had massive levels of eosinophils in the blood, which indicates major allergies. And then we did and there was leaky gut and some liver stress and things like that, but we weren't surprised about that. The third thing that we did was the oligo scan. So the oligo scan is what we use at New Leaf in order to find heavy metal toxicity in the body, as well as mineral deficiencies. Now, once again, this is a guy who's worked on his health for about 10 years. So many of the things in his body were actually quite good. But three of the minerals that really jumped out to me were magnesium deficiency, there was iodine deficiency and selenium deficiency. Now, with iodine deficiency, if you have that long term, you're going to end up with a subclinical thyroiditis before you ever get something like Hashimoto's or Graves' disease or something like that. So his was definitely way too low. And the other thing with the magnesium, if you don't have sufficient levels of magnesium, you can't be making ATP correctly. ATP is your energy molecules. The higher your muscle mass, the higher your muscle quality, the better the ATP you release. And that's why there's 8 times more chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia in women than there are in men. Now, basically that said, okay. And the selenium's interesting as well because the iodine was so low, obviously instantly I started thinking thyroid. But you need selenium and zinc and iodine and a few other bits and bobs in order to convert inactive T4 into activated T3 in your bloodstream. You're supposed to have like 9 times the amount of T4 in your bloodstream or something like that, but nonetheless, with low selenium and low iodine, I would say firstly, he's not converting the T4 to T3 correctly, and secondly, he's not making enough thyroxine in the first place. So he might end up having like this subclinical thyroid issue. I don't know whether you know this, but basically for women, obviously not for men, but for women, it generally takes on average 6 to 10 years and 5 to 8 doctors in order to find Hashimoto's thyroid disorder. So women can be suffering for so long, feeling exhausted and panicky and their hair falling out and their eyebrows thinning and constipation and achy and painy and all these things that when you put them together, it looks like thyroiditis. But if you're only going to your doctor with 1 or 2 symptoms because you've only got a 5-minute consultation, then you don't have the time to discuss these things, so it can easily be missed. So basically, you can imagine, because what we need to do now is get his mineral levels up, we need to detoxify some of the heavy metals, and we need to start working on that thyroid in the background. So at least now we've got a really good plan of attack. Oh, and the other thing is, by the way, anytime I suspect thyroiditis, automatically off gluten and dairy, like no questions asked, because 88% of people with thyroiditis do better off gluten and about 70% of people with thyroiditis do better off dairy. So it's just not worth it being in the diet. So I told him to pretend he had celiac disease and pretend he had a major dairy intolerance. So he's just got to believe that for the next 2 years so that he doesn't get tempted, because it's not worth it. It takes a long time to reverse Hashimoto's or Graves' disease. We'll get the blood test done and sort of to confirm in a little while, but at the moment we just really needed to get him started so that he can start getting some oomph back in his world. Now that's going to take some time, because when you are really deficient in minerals, these minerals do so many things. Every single cell in your body requires iodine and selenium and magnesium. Every single cell. So just getting it into the gut, we've got to get the digestion going on, we've got to get the absorption happening, we've got to start, firstly it's going to be ticking away in the bloodstream, just doing a good job for the cells that are being affected. But then we've got to start storing it in the system so that long term there's actually a chance that he can get better. Because that was his question, do you think I can actually get better? And I'm like, absolutely, yes. I think that's the problem when we've been suffering from chronic fatigue for so long, is that people just start to lose hope. Now, this is a guy who actually uses affirmations and goal setting, and he's incredibly positive, but his poor little body hasn't been following suit. Oh, the other thing we saw in the live blood screening, by the way, was these double nucleoid monocytes. So a monocyte is a white blood cell that's supposed to have one kidney bean-shaped nuclei. Now, with a double nucleoid monocyte, obviously instead of having one kidney bean-shaped nucleus, you've got two nuclei. Now, that is actually the start of genetic disorder, so it might be the onset of, say, an autoimmune disease, or it might be the onset of something where the genes are just starting to change. You know, we've all got like 24,000 genes in the body, and we've got, researchers sort of keep finding all sorts of fun things, of course, but they're guesstimating somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 genes that if they get activated, we then have the genetic disorders like type 1 diabetes, or the obesity that's genetically linked, or rheumatoid arthritis, or all sorts of, or both of the thyroid things, Graves' disease and Hashimoto's. They are genetic disorders, but you have to activate these genes. And a lot of disorders, it's like 75-80% of them, we activate them with our environment. So that's our stress, it's toxicity, it's the products we use on our skin, it's the foods we eat, it's the pesticides, it's chemicals, it's GMOs. It's just all these things that are in our environment that we have more control over. When I flush my toilet, I have the choice whether to use a natural toilet cleaner or a non-natural toilet cleaner. When we are using things on our face, we have the choice whether to use organic products that don't get into our system and cause problems, or use anything that's cheap and easy that sort of looks like it might be good. So we have major choices, and these things are affecting our health. They really are. Anyway, have a great day.